This video is about one of the biggest frustrations that I hear from so many agency owners, which at the same time is also one of the main reasons why you're likely not growing as fast as you could, or why you're not taking home as much money as you should. So let's dive right in, because what we're talking about here is this phenomenon where your profit seems to be going up, but your bank balance seems to be going down, or at least it's not growing at the same speed as your profit would suggest it should. And so as a result, you likely have situations or feelings like this. This is an actual quote that I had from another agency. He says their P&L shows they're profitable, but that month they had less money in the account than they had the month before, which made no sense. And so of course, you can just look at all the transactions and probably everything does make sense. It's not like there's magically money being taken out of your account. However, it doesn't change the fact that that sheet that you're maintaining is suggesting that you're making far more money than you actually are, which as a result means that you're maybe not making the hiring decisions that you want to be making, or you're unable to take out that big chunk of cash that you thought you would have to pay for your apartment, or to pay for a new car, or just to take home the money that you think you should be taking home at the revenue that you're at. And so if you're having these moments multiple times a month where you're just looking confused at your bank account and just frustrated, like not knowing, it's like, where is that money going? And you can't be bothered to just spend like another hour figuring out like what exactly is the cause of this, then this video will be exactly for you. First, let's face the truth of why there likely is such a big disconnect between your profit in your sheet and the actual money in your account. And in most of the cases that I see, the reality here is that your profit is made up. So let me explain exactly what I mean here, and then I'll tell you what to do about it. Because what we see is that a lot of the agencies have a finance dashboard like this. They have different tabs for every month where they just kind of copy over what was there the last month, and maybe they add or remove some things. So they track some clients in there, they track some team members in there, they track some software in there. And then they have their sheet that tells them like they should be making a good profit. But in reality, and this happens 9 times out of 10, once we really dig in and we really reconcile all the numbers, this is what we see, is that this healthy profit that they thought they had based on their sheet is in reality much lower once all the costs are taken into account. Here's some examples that may resonate with you. What we often see are things like a refund or a chargeback that is not actually recorded in the sheet, but of course this is money that literally went out of your account. And so in your nice tracker where you're listing all your client payments, if you're not actually putting in a negative amount for a refund or for a chargeback, you're already overestimating your profit and what is actually in the bank. Other very common reasons are annual plans that you have. That in your sheet, you're just putting what you're paying monthly, but in reality, there's this big payment that just went out for a whole year of service. So if you're not actually keeping track of that, a big reason why the reality never matches up. Other reasons are coaching programs or other, more like educational things that you're purchasing and that you're not putting in the sheet because you don't see it as like an ongoing business expense. And so we see that so often that you're just spending things and just like you can't be bothered to put it in, and so you just kind of treat it as non-existent, which then adds up to thousands every month. That is overestimating your margin and just again putting you in this uncomfortable position that there's such a big disconnect between what's actually in the account and what you think there should be there. Same for trips, and then the other big reason that we see here is just that clients pay late and it's not being tracked. Of course, it's easy to say that these clients pay this much, but if these payments are delayed, that is also not going to show up in your account. So you want to see all these different elements. You want to make sure every single cost is tracked. You want to make sure the open invoices are actually tracked separately, because you can see what is really coming in on a cash basis and what is coming in on an accrual basis, or at least a basis of like, hey, this is the reality if all the payments were coming in at the right time. And so that is the biggest reason why your bank balance and your profit are disconnected. It's just because your profit that you're tracking doesn't include everything. Then, as a result, what you get is that you just have no trust in the numbers. And so if you're still wondering if this applies to you, just ask yourself if any of these statements resonate. Can I take 20K this month? Maybe you should take 10K. What would happen if one of those clients churns? How much could you take out then? What if your ad spend doesn't actually convert at the same rate that you thought? If any of those questions come up when you're thinking about how much you could pay yourself or how much you could invest, that likely means that your tracking is just not good enough, and thus you have no way of really knowing what's going on in your business. And as a result, you're probably underpaying yourself just to be safe, and then likely just at some point getting fed up with it, taking way too much cash out of the business, and even putting yourself at risk, because now all of a sudden the business isn't as healthy anymore because you've took out so much money. And so if you don't have full confidence in knowing what you can pay yourself, what's going on, you need to fix your tracking first. But I'd argue that there's even a bigger problem to this than you being unsure of how much to pay yourself. And that is the impact that this has on your growth. So let's just take a look at some examples. This is what we see all the time, especially when it comes to hiring. On the left here, you see some examples of the hires that you know you should be making to reach that next level of growth, to actually be able to take, some time back yourself and focus on the higher leverage things. But on the right, we see what you actually did because you were unsure of the numbers and what you could actually afford and what you actually did as a result. These are one of the key ones we see all the time. Main one, head of client success. This is a more expensive role, but you as the founder, you just simply cannot oversee, more than 20 or 30 clients very well. And if you are still overseeing that, it's just taking time away from the actual growth activities that you need to be focused on if you want to break through. And so because, again, this role is expensive, it's scary, you're not sure if you can actually afford it. You don't know if the pipeline is actually there. You don't know if you're even collecting enough cash, so you postpone it again and again and again. And as a result, you wait 7 months for something you should have just done right away, but because you weren't sure of it, you didn't do it. Same for strategists, ops managers, even more senior account managers. I see so many agencies just stay with more these cheaper people or freelancers because they don't think they can afford that more expensive role. But as a result, their churn is 15% every month. As a result, their clients are paying them 2 or 3K a month on average. Whereas if they just had the confidence to make these more expensive hires and to elevate their service, to attract better clients, they would grow so much faster and they would actually unlock that next level. And so that is the real issue of not having any trust in your numbers and not knowing where you stand and what you can afford. And so to really summarize that, it comes down to this vicious cycle that we see. And it is it starts with just the fact that the numbers aren't real. You're not trusting the numbers. You're not making decisions based on the reality of your business. And so as a result, everything you do does feel very risky because you're just hoping it all turns out. You don't know what a bad case scenario looks like or what a good case scenario looks like. Everything is risky, everything gets delayed, and everything is just a constant burden for you. And so as a result, indeed, these key hires get postponed. You're stuck with the same team. Everyone's burned out. You may not have the skills or the quality in your agency, again, because you didn't make these hires on time, which now, as a result, have your capacity and your operations just never actually elevate and improve to be worthy of that next stage. And that, as a result, it's still you who is doing everything. You now don't have any time. You certainly don't have time to fix the numbers and actually figure out what's going on because you're still busy trying to grow and you're still the one covering all of the clients. You're still fixing all of the problems. All the fires still come to you because you don't actually know what the numbers are. So you're not hiring the roles you need to hire. And that's how this cycle continues. So you might be growing very slowly. You may have higher churn some months and it just all feels so overwhelming, which all stems down to you not actually having the confidence in your numbers to make the decisions you need to make. Now, how do we break that cycle? This is what we've done for over 50 agencies. And we see that it comes down to these 4 areas really as the main pillars. First one, you just need to have a real-time P&L. Not a P&L that you get from a bookkeeper or accountant on the 15th of the next month to just show you what happened last month. That just doesn't work if you're trying to grow an agency and you just have to wait for weeks to even see what happened in the past. It's already too late. You need to know at this moment in time, where do you stand for this month based on the clients you have right now, based on the team you have right now, based on the cost you have right now. Weekly is fine there, but it can't be at the end of the month. So you gotta have that P&L in place. And then second, this is a slightly more advanced one, but as an agency, this is just non-negotiable to have in place, and that is profit by client. Just think about your business model. If you compare it to any other business, like maybe a manufacturing facility, what this manufacturing facility would do is they would go down to the very cent what it costs them to deliver or manufacture a single unit of the product that they sell. Whereas for an agency, we're just so nonchalant about it. It's just like, oh yeah, we have some clients, we have some people, and the people just deliver for these clients with no clue what it actually costs us. Because like it is the same. You're getting paid for something and you're delivering it. So you want to know what the profit is on the thing that you're delivering. But right now you don't know. And so like what I mean by this is that you need to have something like this in place. You know, this may be even too advanced for your stage. However, if you're doing over 50K a month, this is still what I would like want to have desperately in my agency. You know, seeing for all the clients that you have, what is the revenue they're paying? What is the people cost that you have on them? Whether it comes from time tracking or with like an estimation method, any referral fees you're paying, and then what the profits are. And so if you have, you know, some clients that are nearly 90% margin, whereas other clients are only 30% margin, you need to know this because you might be just busy and feeling the need to hire more and more and more people. But if you're stuck with a bunch of these shitty clients where you're barely making any money on, you know, and if you take out your software cost, your delivery cost, your operation cost, you're pretty much like losing money on some of these clients. You know, you may have clients you're just genuinely losing money on already. Like, there's no hope. Like, unless you have some super profitable clients that are just funding the bad ones, you know, there's just no budget available to make these more senior hires. So you gotta fix the waste in your business to free up that money to make the right investments. So that is something you want to understand. Don't just look at total revenue and total cost. You need to understand at a unit level what that means to your business so that you can see what's going well and what's not working well. Very important to get it right. And third, you want to understand your cash and your runway. This is what we've just been speaking about. You know, even though you have good clients, if they're not paying you, the cash isn't there. Or if you're paying for annual plans all the time, or if you're taking a lot of money out of the business, you know, your business might be super healthy, but your cash may be very poor. And so you need to understand this because otherwise you get into a situation where you can't actually afford the team that you have. And so the last point there that you just want to put in place is around your own pay. Don't be just taking home random amounts here and there. Don't run personal expenses through the business. All of that will just mess you up. It will, put you at risk with any tax offices that are applicable to your country. But also, this is the reason why it's like, you know, the business says you're profitable, but the bank doesn't. It's because you are just not treating this professionally. You're taking home money whenever you want, how much you want. Just set a clear rule in place. Pay yourself a fixed salary every month. Take home dividends on top of that when the cash is there. And then everything will start to make a lot more sense and you won't always be confused about where you're at. And so the question I will leave you with is, if you knew your numbers were real, what would change? You know, ask yourself this. What decisions are you currently not making because you don't actually have the data? You know, whether that's a new hire or something new, or whether that's something internally in your agency, like a client that you know is a pain in the ass, but that you're just not firing or you're not starting that conversation to reprice or rescope the engagement because you don't have that real confidence. You know, you don't have that number in your face that says this client is losing you money. You know, think about that. What would you change if you knew your real numbers? That's what I'll leave you with. You can watch a bunch of other videos here on the channel as well, or you can go to the link and have a call directly with me if you want some help getting all of this sorted out. I'll see you in the next one.